Planning Board meeting to order. My name is Kathy Barnard. I'm the chairman of the Planning Board. Let me introduce the other members. Down at the end, to my right, Brad Harriman, who's representative from the Board of Selectmen. Next to Brad, Paul O'Brien. Then John Thurston, Mike Hodder. To my left, Von Dugan, who is the vice chairman, Peter Goodwin, Leanne Keithley, our recording secretary. Next to Leanne, Matt Sullivan, the planning director, and next to Matt is Laura Spector Morgan, the planning board attorney. The first item on the agenda is a public hearing. Let me just read that into the record. Michael Simmons, this is an appeal of a driveway permit 16-24, Stoneham Road, tax map 104-11. At this time, let me turn this over to Laura, who's going to discuss the jurisdictional issues that we have.
Did you want to do the continuances first?
Excuse me?
Do you want to explain the continuances first?
Yes, I do.
I thought you might.
Yes, right, thanks. Okay, and we did have some continuances, and I apologize. I had a big note to myself, but that wasn't too helpful, I guess. First of all, we're postponing the capital improvement program public hearing that was scheduled for tonight, but is being rescheduled to October 17th, 2017 at 7 o'clock. That's the 2018 to 2027 capital improvement program. The next item that has been withdrawn is John Hoagland and Sharon Wells, a public hearing on 13 Bass Drive for a special use permit. That has been withdrawn, so there'll be no hearing on that this evening. The next item, Sean H. and Wendy L. O'Brien and Joseph and Angela Pasker. This was scheduled for a public hearing for South Hodge Shore, tax map 164-5, 164-9, 164-10, 164-42, case 2017-30. This was a boundary line adjustment and a lot merger. Let's see, the boundary line adjustment is going to be on the 7th of November 2017, and the merger is at our next meeting, which is the 17th. Okay, so now we've dealt with the postponements. Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Attorney Nix, I'm going to direct this initial comment to you to make sure that I fully understand your appeal. As I read your appeal, it really has 4 components. It's an appeal of the driveway permit that was granted by the Director of Public Works. It's an appeal of the excavation permit to do work in a Class 6 road that was granted by the Board of Selectmen. It's a request that the board find that the stormwater regulations and the site plan review regulations are applicable to this project. And it's an objection to the cutting of trees on a scenic road. Do I understand that correctly?
You may need to flip it on. Sorry about that. On top.
Testing.
Oh, that was
Testing.
Yep.
Now we have it.
You're on.
This didn't work the other night at the selectmen's meeting very well, but I got it figured out now. Just to address your
Can
issues.
you introduce yourself, please?
I'm sorry. My name is Stephen Nix. I represent the Greens.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I said that before the mic came on. So actually there on your list there are really 2 issues here. One is the driveway permit, and the other is the request regarding the stormwater. The issue regarding the excavation permit, we realize is an issue that is governed by the selectmen.
Okay.
And we also realize that the scenic road is a separate application that will have to be made.
Okay.
I did include some of the background information in the appeal
Okay.
so the record would be full.
Okay, wonderful.
So-
That makes
so
our
we're-
job tonight considerably easier.
Okay.
All right, so I think the easiest thing for the board to start with would be the request that the board find that the stormwater regulations found in your site plan and your subdivision regulations are applicable to this project. And I certainly have a recommendation with regard to that, and I would suggest that you allow both attorneys to speak to that if that works for the board as well. My recommendation is that you find that the stormwater regulations do not apply to this project because those only apply to site plan applications and subdivision applications. And because this is a single-family house on an existing lot of record, you have before you neither a subdivision nor a site plan, and therefore you have no valid manner in which to apply your stormwater regulations to this project. Though certainly I expect Attorney Nix has a different position on that, and Attorney Hyde might also want to be heard on that.
Okay.
Okay, what the application that's before the board, and if I can just take a second. This is a copy of the plan.
Oh, I don't need to see it. I'm good.
Sorry. This is a copy of the plan that was submitted by the applicant, and what this plan shows is the essentially the upgrade of a public Class 6 road. This is not an application for a building permit on the lot at this time. The building permit application has not been submitted. The site plan around the house has not been designed or submitted. So what this essentially is a private individual who is requesting the town to use a town right-of-way, to upgrade a town right-of-way. That is not a residential use. That is a governmental use. The individual is upgrading a piece of essentially public property, the public easement, and under the stormwater regulations, it specifically mentions governmental use, and in this case, the town cannot claim that it is immune from its own regulations because the town is not the entity that is going to be doing this work. It is a private individual who is using a piece of public property and developing, and that is why this is not a single-family residential development. The application that is before you is for the road. It's not for the house. And therefore, the stormwater regulations apply.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Hyde?
I'm not nearly as tall as Attorney Nix. So. Good evening. My name is Stephen Hyde. I represent Michael Simmons, the applicant. I agree entirely with the advice that your attorney has given you. I concur with her analysis. There may be some misunderstanding in Attorney Nix's mind about what site plan review is. The requests that have been made for the improvements to the road are in accordance with the Selectmen's Class 6 road policy. They're contemplated by that policy. And that policy specifically pertains to construction of a single-family residence on a Class 6 road. The application is for the construction of a single-family residence on a Class 6 road. Other than what Attorney Spector Morgan has told you, I have really nothing to add. I don't think that this board has the purview to apply the stormwater management regulations to the particular application. So if you have any questions, I'm certainly willing to entertain them and answer them.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, any questions from board members on that issue?
I just have a general question. It seems that what is on our agenda is simply the driveway appeal. I don't see it's clear that any other appeal is pending here.
What you received was entitled Appeal of Approval of Driveway and Excavation Permit and Determination of Jurisdiction. So I think even though the agenda might not include these other issues, they were certainly included within the appeal document and thus were properly noticed.
Okay, so it's, we need to address them.
Yes, I think you
Right, okay. Okay, and
And
you
my
think
advice
that it's
stands.
best that we go ahead and address each one of them individually as we,
I think the two issues before you are distinguishable enough that you can make a decision right now on the stormwater management applicability, and then if you decide you have jurisdiction over the driveway permit, turn to that second.
okay, well, when we adopted the stormwater management regulations back in 2014, it was very clear that these would only be used for site plan review, and that includes commercial buildings and multifamily and subdivisions. And this doesn't seem to be either, as far as I'm concerned.
I agree with you, Madam Chairman. I think we can just move on to consider the driveway permit.
Okay, and would you be willing to make a motion that
Do we need to
planning
go-
board does
do we need
not
to
have?
make- Do we need to go that
jurisdiction?
far to make a motion to,
Yes, please.
okay, then I move that in the case of, oh, bear with me, let me get myself organized here.
I can suggest a motion if you like.
Thank you.
Perhaps an appropriate motion would be that I move that the board find that the stormwater management regulations contained in the site plan review and subdivision regulations do not apply to the upgrade of this Class 6 road.
May I ask if our recording secretary has that wording? And if she does, would you put it in my name as a motion made?
Seconded.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All in favor of this motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Oh, you're abstaining? Okay. One
Paul
abstention.
abstained as well.
Two abstentions, okay. Okay,
So the second issue then before the board is the issuance of the driveway permit and an appeal by an aggrieved abutter of the grant of the driveway permit. The jurisdictional issue before you is whether or not the abutter actually has the right to appeal to this board. It's my opinion and the opinion of other members of my firm that they do for a couple of reasons. Although your driveway regulations specifically provide an appeal only to an aggrieved landowner whose application is denied, it seems to us that an appeal, in order to be a valid procedure, needs to be granted to both an aggrieved landowner when the application is denied and an aggrieved abutter when the application is approved. And that is because, unless you can point me to one, I'm not sure there's a rational basis to distinguish between the two types of aggrievement. Both parties would be aggrieved with regard to the Director of Public Works actions on a driveway permit. So because I'm not sure there's a rational basis and we haven't been able to find any in your minutes from when that regulation was adopted, I think that in order for your appeal mechanism to be valid, it needs to be equally available to both parties. There's also a due process argument. It seems fair that if the applicant has the ability to appeal to this board to protect its due process rights, that the aggrieved abutter should also have that right. Finally, there's the issue that this board is ultimately the board that grants the driveway permits. You're permitted to delegate that authority, and you have done that in this case to your Director of Public Works. But because this board retains authority over those driveway permits, it makes sense that an appeal would come here before it would go to Superior Court. So again, it's my advice that you do have jurisdiction. Again, I'm sure Attorney Nix and Attorney Hyde would like to be heard on that.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, excuse me, Attorney Morgan Spector has done a good job in making my argument for me, which is essentially the argument that I made, that this board does have jurisdiction, and it's basically a due process. That if you give it to one, you give it to the other, and so I will stand on your attorney's arguments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hyde?
I guess that puts me a bit in the hot seat. Obviously, for the reasons stated in the objection we filed to the appeal, as well as the objections that we filed to both the planning board and to Director Ford, your ordinance lacks at all, Chapter 41, any indication of an appellate right whatsoever. So the town's only guidance on the appeal and an issuance of a driveway permit are the driveway permit regulations that the planning board adopted in November of 2009, I believe. And those, that adoption or the amendment to the regulations that year were based on, I don't have copies for everybody, but they were based on a PowerPoint presentation that was provided to the board at the time. And as a result of the PowerPoint presentation that was presented to the board, the language for the addition of an appeal mechanism was added to the regulation. And it's very specific. It is very specific as to who has the right to an appeal and in what circumstances, and then in the event that an appeal is undertaken, what has to be done in order for that appeal to be processed, what the process is for the appellant. And I don't think that the then existing planning board took that information lightly when it crafted the language that it added to the regulation regarding driveway permits in providing an appellate right to an aggrieved landowner who was denied a permit. I think it was very clear that the planning board intended for the aggrieved party, the person denied, the landowner denied the permit, to have an ability to redress that if they felt that, like the regulation indicates, that they could amend the application in such a manner so that it would be approvable. And it's very specific in the regulation. I don't think that it was by accident that they left off that an abutting landowner would have the right to appeal the issuance of a driveway permit that affects only the landowner's land. The driveway is used to service the land of the landowner. If the planning board had intended that an abutter would have the right to appeal the issuance of that permit, even though it doesn't have an impact on the abutting landowner, they would have put that in the ordinance, or in the regulation, I'm sorry. And that's basically what I have in our objection as well. The plain language of the regulation that the board adopted gives that right only to the landowner and only if they are denied the application.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Planning board members, comments?
Attorney Hyde, do you have copies of that PowerPoint document?
I only have the one, and I only have the one. I apologize. I could email it around. It was provided to me in the context of the ongoing litigation for the other approved application from the Board of Selectmen. So I can get that to you. The presentation, I guess, was significantly longer. I was only provided the 2 pages that I gave to Mr. O'Brien. But literally, the language contained in the PowerPoint presentation is essentially the language that's in the regulation, and I don't believe that the regulation is available anywhere but with the driveway application. It's the last 3 pages, and I'll give you the only copy I have of that as well, and it's under Section G, where it talks about the appeals process. So,
Okay, well, I have a copy of the PowerPoint.
Who was the
so
author of that, do we know?
This is, what was-
I have a question for you, sir.
no, well, here, can you look at that,
The
please?
first question is, who was the author of the PowerPoint presentation?
I can get you that if you guys.
That
I
was,
assume it was Robert Hausman.
yes, that
Yes,
was
it
Robert
Hausman.
Hausman.
Yes, it was. Who had the question? I'm sorry.
I have a question.
Sure.
When this regulation was written or the PowerPoint presentation was done, the people writing it only were concerned about the person who was denied the permit.
I assume.
And so therefore, they were worried about an aggrieved party. And you're making the assumption that there's only possibly one aggrieved party.
I'm not making the assumption that there's only one aggrieved party. I'm just merely stating that the black and white in the regulation that this town adopted, that this board adopted for the benefit of the people of this town, only contemplates that a landowner denied the permit would be the aggrieved party. It doesn't contemplate that anyone else would be an aggrieved party. Whether I share that opinion with the black and white letter of the regulation is somewhat immaterial. That's what's in the black and white, and generally speaking, when a court is going to interpret the language of an ordinance or a statute or anything, they're going to look to the clean black and white lettering, and they're going to make a determination on what the import of the written words are.
If I may, Madam Chairman, I don't think the planning board, when it came to compose the driveway permit regulations, contemplated only one aggrieved party in any potential conflict over a driveway application. It provided the mechanism only for one party, however, to appeal a decision either for or against the issuance of a driveway permit. So to refine it, there's one aggrieved party specified as one process allowed that person. There's no indication of whether or not the planning board considered there not to be potential other aggrieved party. It simply did not provide a mechanism for that person to appeal.
I don't disagree with that either, to be
I'm
honest with you.
just trying to refine your argument for
Yeah,
you.
no. So in that regard, if the planning board had contemplated that there might be another aggrieved party in the intervening 8 or 10 years, whatever it's been, the planning board hasn't again amended the regulation to say that the appeal applies to an abutter. But if you think about it just realistically, it's not often that somebody who is an abutter would actually have a cause of action or a reason to be aggrieved that somebody else was allowed to put a driveway on their own land. We're not talking about a shared driveway. We're not talking about a driveway that crosses the land of another. We're just talking about one's ability to connect their land and the structure that they intend to build on that land to the traveled way. So it's not unrealistic to think that the planning board never envisioned that an abutter would be aggrieved by someone having a driveway permit granted. Moreover, there's no law in the state on it either that I was able to find. This is a very unusual situation where, in reality, an abutter doesn't want someone to develop and build a single-family residence on their land, which the town permits. So a way to attack that is to say, well, they should be able to have a driveway permit. So they can build their house, they just can't get to it. I mean, that's really why we're here, is so that an abutter who doesn't want someone else to build a single-family residence on 20 acres can try to stop that effort, even though that effort is completely legal in this town.
I think, if I may interject, Laura Spector-Morgan's argument still pertains that there is a due process requirement here. If there is an aggrieved party who is not provided for, there has to be some way for that aggrieved party to be given a hearing My only question is this the correct venue for that hearing?
Right.
Without speaking for the other boards or counsel for the other board, that was also appealed to. I believe the understanding in the town is that there probably really is no good place for this to happen, and because there is an appeal process for an aggrieved landowner denied a driveway permit to appeal to this board, that therefore any appeal has to happen here. Again, that's just not what the regulation says. So,
Agreed, and absent any specifications in the regulation, given the requirement that there must be due process accorded to all individuals feeling aggrieved, there must be some venue, correct?
Right.
Doesn't necessarily lie within the town.
well, whether or not an abutting landowner has a due process right to appeal the granting of a driveway solely on the land of another is not supported by the law in this state. It's not refuted by the law either. There is no law on it. This, to the best of my knowledge,
Therefore, where does it properly lie?
unfortunately, with the court system.
Okay, well, this has been, this was done in 2009. This is the first time that the planning board has used this appeal process, or it has been used. It's been my experience on this planning board that the planning board has always looked to be as fair as they could be, as inclusive as they could be, and again, to talk about the due process. It seems it's the right thing to do. To whether it should be amended, that's for another discussion, but it certainly going ahead and allowing this to proceed is consistent with certainly many other actions the planning board has made over the years. So,
Madam Chair, you have a comment down at the end of the table?
okay, yes.
Madam Chairman, I believe, at least in my time here, we've had 2 instances where folks have come forward looking for driveways for their property. In both instances, we've had folks come forward, and I'm reminded of one in particular, where a person came forward and said, if this person puts a driveway across the street from me, that will open up my view to a given body of water. And the question was asked at that time of the town planner, do I have any ability to refute this? The town planner said, you have the ability, if your taxes go up, to file for a tax abatement. It's on the minutes someplace. So when I read the presentation, or the PowerPoint document, I couldn't help but come away from asking myself the question that kind of goes like this. If all the regulations are followed, if I am putting in a driveway, must I satisfy my neighbor? If I'm doing everything right, must I satisfy my neighbor and incur additional expense? When I've sat here on the planning board and had 2 instances where people have asked that question relative to the views that they would have now, I have an enhanced view of a mountain, I have an enhanced view of a lake, because you put a driveway in. And I know our answer has been, well, that's the way it is. And I'm not being flip in my answer, but trying to shortcut it. So I think we might have deliberately not put into these regulations that the abutters have a due process obligation here. Through this planning board, maybe someplace else. Definitely someplace else. I'm not sure through this planning board. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you.
If there's no other questions for me.
Thank you.
I may respond? The discussion here regarding the PowerPoint is what's called reviewing the legislative history, and the legislative history of a particular ordinance should not be reviewed unless it's under very circumstances that would allow it. And in this particular, and the reason is that because this is a published ordinance that is attached to the back of the application, the average person is not going to know that they also have to go find a PowerPoint presentation from 2009 and try to interpret that as well. So when a statute is adopted, it's adopted with the language, and then what happened before that happened before that. The applicant is also stating that the driveway is on private property and is completely on the land of the applicant, but 10 minutes ago they argued that the road, the entire road is a part of the residential development, and that's how they successfully argued that the stormwater management plan didn't apply. So they're arguing out of both sides of their mouths on this. The feed to this road under New Hampshire law is owned to the center line by both of the abutters, or all of the abutters. So in fact, this driveway is not located completely on the land of the applicant. Part of this driveway, as it's been represented and argued successfully by the applicant, is on land of the Greens, and therefore they are an aggrieved party.
Okay, thank you. Okay, planning board members, we need to...
If I may just briefly, I meant to do this before the Board of Selectmen last week. Given the fact that this is recorded, I want to make sure we clarify the record. Attorney Nix just indicated that the driveway permit regulations are a published ordinance, and that is not correct. Your ordinance regarding driveways is Chapter 41, and this is not part of your ordinance. It is a driveway permit regulation. It is attached to the driveway permit that I gave to the board member. It is not part of your ordinance. It is part of the operating rules for the application of a driveway permit and the review of that. Secondly, and I don't need to go in a tit for tat with Attorney Nix, but I did not argue that the entire roadway is part of my client's house lot. I did not do that. I indicated that pursuant to the Class 6 road policy, again, this town's policy, that the request to make the changes to the road are in accordance with that policy, not that the roadway is part of my client's lot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, planning board members, we need to determine if we have jurisdiction to proceed with this. What are your thoughts?
I'll go first, I suppose. I do not think that we do. I think that the regulation for driveway permit speaks only to an appeal from a landowner denied a permit. If there is a due process assumption that those aggrieved were not the applicants for a driveway permit should also have a hearing to voice their aggrievement, that does not lie here. There's no regulatory allowance in our own ordinances or our own driveway permit regulations, for lack of a better word, that allows anyone other than the landowner denied to appeal to the planning board in this instance for a driveway permit. I would move to deny this application as of lack of jurisdiction.
Deny for...
Let's appeal for a lack of jurisdiction. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Somebody want to second that? We need to...
Denying this appeal from an abutter of driveway permit issued to another party on the basis of the abutter's aggrievement. We do not lack any procedure in which to hear such an aggrievement. We do not have standards to apply. We don't even have standards to apply to determine whether this person really does have standing or not. We have no legislative authority on which to stand to hear the appeal. I think this is the incorrect venue for this appeal.
Okay, so your motion is to deny the appeal for lack of jurisdiction?
Correct.
Okay. Anyone want to second this
I
motion?
would second it too. Preferred it.
Who's seconding? Did you second? Okay.
I think that, given that our Public Works Director has reviewed this application, as he does every driveway permit, he has recommended that, you know, there still needs to be address to scenic roads, drainage, protecting stone walls, and locating utility poles. I mean, that is something that is still pending that can involve the abutters in public hearing. And I think that that is the proper venue for any complaint, and not a denial, and actually not an approval of a driveway permit. It just doesn't seem to follow to me that if it's not a denial, why would you appeal it if you're not the landowner? And we already have a list of things that need to be satisfied. Why not follow the usual procedure?
I think there's two things going on here. One is, in principle, doesn't a butter have the right to appeal a driveway? And I think what Mike has offered, I think, Mike, you and I are talking of the same words, maybe just different verbiage.
No, I'm suggesting that in theory, the abutter has an absolute right to appeal a decision by an administrative official of this town, but I don't think in this case, appeal lies to the planning board, which is the issuing authority, because there's no statutory or ordinential, or whatever the word might be, authorization for that.
And so I kind of go along with that, and I cite in my, my review precedents here. I mean, we've had at least two that my fragile memory can recall, where it very easily could have been, hey, I don't want you putting a driveway across the street from me because I'm going to have my taxes go up because I'm going to see Lake whatever. And I would find that to be troubling if we got into that business. I do believe Mike's right that there should be a place where people can go, not here. And I also agree with Vaughn that notwithstanding this notion of who has appellate rights, there still is some work that the Public Works Director said you got to do in order to get this thing up to whatever we want to call it. I'll call it snuff. So I think that's right. I think that's our business. That's our Public Works Director's business to make sure that that gets done. So standing on Mike's motion, I continue to support it.
I have a question as to how someone ends up appealing what the Department of Public Works is going to be making as recommendations. In other words, there are these things which are stated, and if there is going to be a permit given, how is what conversation goes on in that process? Is there the possibility for people to say that this is not right? And it's a scenic road, it is these things which they can then work with, but is there really appropriate regress for all people involved?
Are you asking if the appeal is not to this board, where is the appeal to?
Right.
It would be to Superior Court.
So to answer your question, there is an appeal. Okay. Okay, any other comments before I call the question?
And just for the public, short of that Superior Court appeal, there is a public hearing for any scenic road change, so that there is an avenue for people still to be heard.
Scenic road statute applies in certain situations. It may or may not apply in this situation. This board hasn't been asked to rule on that, and neither have I.
Okay, all in favor, so does anybody need the motion read to you again, or are you all set?
Just to be clear, that if this board does deny this application, we are not denying the applicant redress elsewhere.
We don't have the power to do that.
Essentially,
We're not denying
Yeah.
essentially, Mr. Harder, if I can summarize your motion, it is to deny this application for a lack of jurisdiction.
Jurisdiction, right, okay. Okay, the motion has been made and seconded, and all in, I'm sorry, we're in the process of voting.
Deny the appeal.
Thank you.
For lack of jurisdiction. I meant this application, not that application. Deny the appeal for lack of jurisdiction.
Yes, right, okay. All right, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Okay, and I'll abstain. Okay, Laura, what about the other two issues? Do we need to vote on those, or?
You do not need to deal with them. Attorney Nix has indicated they're not before this board tonight.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about the excavation
Correct.
and the scenic road?
Correct.
That's not an
That'll be a
issue.
question for another day.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. Okay, then, folks, that there will be no public hearing on the appeal of the driveway permit due to lack of jurisdiction on the part of the planning board. And thank you all for coming and for your attention. Okay.
I'm leaving.
Let's see, Laura, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Okay, come again. All right. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the opportunity for public comment. If anyone wants to make any comments to the planning board, now would be the time that you could do that.
I'm Gordon Lang. I arrived late. I didn't know if the O'Brien Hodge Shore issue had been postponed, or there's a lot line adjustment.
The boundary, oh, sorry, Kathy. The boundary line adjustment has been continued to November 7th.
Okay.
And the voluntary merger will be before the board on October 17th.
Okay. Is there any way to see what that's about beforehand?
Yeah, absolutely. I can provide the information to you if you want to stop into the Planning and Development office anytime during normal hours.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, on to the minutes, September 5th.
Madam Chairman, no adjustment, at least from me for the minutes. Just a punctuation mark that I'd like, I had asked on page, I guess it's page 3. Paul O'Brien requested a work session to further discuss such. I just would ask that we make sure that that finds its way to the work sessions. It had to do with the Brewster Academy application. No adjustments to the minutes.
Okay, did you get that, Leanne?
It's difficult to hear.
Yeah,
I said I'm not making any adjustments to the minutes, only asking that my request, which I made on, I believe it's page 3, underneath the Brewster Academy application, find its way into the working session.
right, then.
I'm sorry?
Be on the next agenda.
On the next agenda? Good,
Is that,
thank you.
is that right, Leanne?
All right, good.
Oh,
Thank you,
okay.
Leanne.
Okay, all right. Anything else? Second. Oh, on page 4, where it's down the paragraph beginning with John Thurston, recommended approval of a project without plan approvals, noting the applicant shouldn't be subject to restrictions because the project doesn't fall meet the threshold. I think maybe we can just take out fall. Yeah, okay. Is that okay with you, John? Okay.
You good with that, John?
Okay, and then on the top of page 5, third paragraph or whatever, Mike Hodder, the second line, Randy Tatro stated
He,
her,
he,
he
her,
heard, that's right.
her,
Okay. Anything else? Would somebody make a motion to accept these minutes as corrected?
So moved.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, great. All right, moving on to September 19th. Any issues? All right, somebody make them.
Approve.
Okay, thank you. Somebody want second?
Seconded.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? And Paul abstains. Okay. All right. Okay. Matt, did you want to go over anything in the EDC minutes?
Nothing of note in the EDC minutes. The EDC is recrafting its mission statement. I just wanted to point that out. I think sort of taking a holistic look at what their charge is and how they should be working, not only with other committees and boards in the town, but also with the business community as well, and being potentially more active and identifying some focus committees or groups to work on specific tasks. But they're starting that process off with a review of the mission statement to ensure that it's crafted well.
Is that mission statement going to be reviewed by the Board of Selectmen, which empowers the EDC?
That's an excellent question. I'm not sure that it would be. I'm not sure that it needs to be.
Oh, I would,
But I think it should be presented to them as they do charter that group. So I think it could be important to have a review by the board. Yes.
It's always good to have a review by the issuing authority.
Yeah.
Be sure that the subcommittee is not overstepping its bounds.
I think it's great that they're going to freshen up the mission statement, so hear, hear.
Onward, right?
While we're at it, did they, is this the profile of demographics? Is that an EDC document?
Nope, that's not. That's just something I was providing to the board for reference.
It's pretty good.
It's very interesting, too.
It's pretty good.
Pretty informative.
I thought it was an interesting look. Yeah.
Can I go up into unfinished business?
Yeah,
CIP.
just a sec.
I'm sorry, we haven't finished CIP.
Yeah, anything else? Matt? I guess not.
Nope.
Oh,
No.
Okay. Are you waiting, you folks waiting for the merge?
So Tom, just as a note, Tom, who has been approved by the board, still needs to get
Right.
sworn in, and we do have a guest with us tonight that's just sort of listening in on the meeting.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't want to, no.
I'm a landscape architect who's moved to town, so that's it. Urban design.
Okay, well then go ahead. Let's go with, if she was waiting for some action, I didn't want to hold.
Right, so are we
So
good?
go ahead with the
Are we
unfinished.
good with CIPC?
Go ahead with unfinished business, Mike.
About unfinished business, are you?
Oh, I had a EDC question.
You're ahead of me, then.
Again, another work plan item. We visited with the hotel owners, for lack of a better.
Yeah.
Is that on the work plan to get back to them? I think we had a couple of, we got to get back to them.
Yeah, I actually have a specific comment on that. I had done some strategizing myself and determined that it was best to do a mailing in the shoulder season. So when these folks sort of calm down when it comes to their business. So what I'm planning is in the course of this month, October, is to send out that non-conforming information piece to them and inviting them in to talk to me about what expansion opportunities and what opportunity they have within the context of the zoning ordinance to change their business or improve or expand their business. So that will be done within the month of October. That's the planned date for that. Does that adequately answer your question, Paul?
Well, it answers the question that we're going to get back to them. I thought we were going to do it as a committee, but if we're going to do it through you, that's going to be great.
As long as you can handle the influx of inquiries. There were several hoteliers interested in that form of outreach when we had our meeting here that time. You may become quite busy.
And I think that may be a good thing. And I think the intent, Paul, was really to reach out if they have questions about basically how we regulate within the community and what flexibilities might exist. And I felt that the best way for them to do that was in a one-on-one setting with me initially. So we may find it's successful, we may find it's not, but I think it's a good outreach, at least for the department, to work with folks to identify potential opportunities within the ordinance.
Right, I thought that we had felt that it would be best if you did it, because what you wanted to talk to them about is if they're all non-conforming businesses, that there are, and whatever their plans are, all their plans would be sort of different, and you could kind of guide them in accordance with the provisions of the ordinance.
Yeah, and I think it was an opportunity, honestly, to address any potential misconceptions there might be out there about the zoning ordinance or their ability to expand. So I think that was really the intent of that face-to-face or one-on-one contact in the beginning, rather than in a public forum where they feel like they're being corrected or anything of that nature. Just kind of a off-the-record conversation with them, I thought was important.
Well, I would hope too, after that, you would come back to the board and say, here are a number of issues that they're having.
Yeah, and
so that we can address them.
Yeah, and I think the intent is to hopefully drive some zoning change potentially if we identify issues that the board is comfortable potentially pursuing. I think that's a great idea.
Perhaps after you've heard from them and made a digest of their feelings to us, we could call them back if they were interested for a meeting with the board. They get the sense that the board as a whole is interested in their concerns, and we'll be working towards doing whatever we can to make them better.
Yeah, I think especially after the forum that was held, the joint forum that was held, I think Paul is dead on that we need to re-engage with them as a larger group. And I think that I also look at that one-on-one as an opportunity to tell them that the board is really interested in hearing what they have to say about these issues that are economic development related as well, and potentially sort of planting the seed for a regroup meeting sometime early next year or whenever this board decides to re-engage.
We had talked in the past about meeting regularly with the EDC. How do you folks feel about that? Did you want to schedule a time to meet with them? Or?
I think maybe if we do, we should establish an agenda, of topics and direct it.
Okay.
And only under those circumstances would I regularly meet with the EDC. And wouldn't be sanguine in any other circumstances.
Okay, well, we will be reaching out to EDC and all other chamber and everyone else with the architectural design standards, so that needs to probably go first, I guess. I mean, we'll be talking about that at our next meeting?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
So, Madam Chairman, I think it's a great idea. I think now that they're refreshing their remit, good. That could inform all of us as to what areas of emphasis they want to get involved or be a party to. Good. No matter what happens in the town economic development speaking, it's probably going to bounce off the planning board because we're just in the middle of all this stuff. And so that would be good, but I'd agree with Mike. Well, I agree with Kathy. Do we want to meet with them more frequently? I think we've always said every time that question's asked, yes. So we'll say it yes. But I think with a little more structure so that it doesn't turn into what we're going to do in the future stuff. Talk about what we can do now together to affect change. And that would be good.
Okay.
As long as we set the agenda and our chairman runs the meeting, I'd have no problems with it.
Okay, and how quickly do you think they're going to move on this new mission?
I think so I'm sort of heading that effort when it comes to coordinating. I would assume that the next meeting we would come to the EDC. I'm working with a small subcommittee with a few recommendations to the existing mission statement. At that meeting, we will review those recommendations, get consensus, I think, from the board, not a formal vote, and then go back for another meeting or so with the subcommittee, and then potentially bring a new mission statement. We're talking about November in that case, for adoption. And I guess the question is, if the BOS do want some role of comment on that mission statement, which I think is appropriate, I think we can accomplish that by bringing it to them as an agenda item at a meeting, and I think that could fit into that November timeline as well.
Okay.
And I know that Word document that I proffered a while ago that, we did some forensics on and said we can't find where that came from. That was Rob's work.
Yep.
And I think it was good. I really think that was a good, chunky piece. It was clear. It had, it had stuff you could get your hands on. And if you haven't provided EDC that, I just ask you to think about maybe sharing it with them. I think it was good. I think it was helpful.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. I'm just taking notes. Yeah.
Unfog the fog.
This most, if I may, this most recent economic document that you brought us, which you ran together off the net, has that been shared with the EDC?
Nope. I frankly just pulled it together a week ago for this group, but it could be sent right along for their next meeting. And I think, as we may discuss in a few minutes, it's a pretty interesting piece, and I think it would be good for them to review it. So I can certainly pass it along for their agenda.
Okay, so will you send them, because I know we all received copies of that chapter, but I don't think EDC did.
Yep, I can do that.
Okay. Okay, anything other unfinished? We've got lots unfinished. Well, yes, we're in.
Unfinished business. I have in my file the meeting memorandum from the August 8th, 2017 meeting, which included wording for 3 zoning amendments, which were to be reviewed and...
It will come back, I promise. Yes.
They're coming back?
Yep. To be quite honest, it's once we get the CIP completed, and hopefully through this board, that's where the attention will turn to the zoning amendments. I apologize, we don't have those now.
I'm good.
Oh, okay. Okay. Why don't we go on to new business, the lot merger, Michael Neil Morgan Living Trust tax map 225-10 and 225-11. And this is on Warren Sands Road, right?
That's correct. Quick review of this one. This is the project address for this provided is 152 Warren Sands Road. That's because as we review this, lot 10 is currently developed with a small structure. That's the larger lot. There's development to the north side of that lot. But obviously this is a voluntary lot merger for 225-10 and 225-11. One of these lots is in the Shorefront Residential District, and the rest of the lot is in the Rural Residential District, and then the smaller lot is completely within the Rural Residential District. These lots are, lot 10 is 3 acres in size, and lot 11 is 0.46 acres in size. And the result in the merger would obviously be a 3.46 acre parcel with about 390 feet of frontage on Warren Sands Road, which is a private road. And the proposed lot is in fact compliant with the rural residential districts, which is the more restrictive in this case. Minimum road frontage of 200 feet and minimum lot area of 3 acres. And obviously because one of the lots is not developed, we don't create a conformity by having multiple primary structures on one lot.
So the 0.46 acres is non-conforming whether it's in the shorefront or where it's in rural. So it's a non-conforming lot, period.
That's correct.
It's owned by the same people?
Owned by the same folks, yep.
What is the white area there in the aerial?
No-brainer.
The white area is on the smaller lot. The smaller lot. I believe it's used as a parking area. It's a gravel and sand area. I'm pretty sure that's where they park, and they probably access the structure from there.
Okay, so basically what we're doing is eliminating a non-conforming lot.
That's correct.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Second?
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? Okay. The next one, lot merger, 5 Hopewell Shores LLC and 7 Hopewell Shores LLC, tax map 240-6 and 240-26. And you said these are the same
Yes.
owners.
These are somewhat odd in that they are owned in separate LLCs. However, they have the same managing member by which this is authorized. And 7 Hopewell Shores, in this case, LLC, will be the surviving owner. The lots in question here are 240-006 and 240-026. One of these lots, the larger lot, is in fact developed with a primary structure. The smaller lot is undeveloped. That's lot 6. Lot 6 is 1.22 acres in size, and lot 026 is 4.71 acres in size. And the result of the merger will be a 5.93 acre parcel with 176 feet of road frontage on Tips Cove Road. And it should be noted that Hopewell Shores Road also bisects lot 26 as well, so it gains private road frontage there. And approximately 500 feet of shore frontage, which is compliant. So the proposed lot is compliant with the SFR's minimum road frontage of 150 and minimum lot area of 1 acre. And as I noted, there's no development on lot 6 and a primary structure on lot 26.
So again, we're eliminating a non-conforming shorefront.
Isn't it conforming?
Is the 122 non-conforming?
The 122 is actually not conforming in the sense that it doesn't have road frontage.
No frontage.
Yeah, it has no road frontage. Additionally, the shore frontage is not conforming either, I don't believe. So, yes, and I would add, you may see in the sort of the non-aerial version here that there are some structures that are very close to the lot line for 26 and 5 and 6, and there is some removal going on there that's not pertinent necessarily to this voluntary lot merger, but there are other nonconformities being removed, structural nonconformities, by this owner. Not that that's relevant to this decision, just a note that we have a lot of nonconforming structures in this area.
Yes, yeah. People do realize that they can't come back in for subdivision approval.
Yes, they do. I can note, it's public record, that this lot, as it's proposed, the larger lot is, there's a large proposed shorefront redevelopment for this lot that would make subdivision impossible, not only from the ordinance's perspective, but from a structural perspective as well. So I think they're well aware of the implications.
Okay, all right.
Move to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, subcommittee reports. We have not had a TRC. We certainly have had CIP meetings, though,
Yeah.
weekly, it seems.
Yeah, we've had lots of CIP meetings, and we're plugging along. I just wanted to note that we did continue the public hearing this evening. However, that was really in the interest of tying a bow on a few changes that needed to be made to the CIP from the CIP committee level before it endorses that plan for this board's review. So we just wanted to make sure it was complete before sending it to this board and then the Board of Selectmen subsequent. But the committee has done an excellent job, obviously, getting that together.
Okay, and so we'll be seeing that at the next meeting.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
Could we allocate time for discussion of the CIPC?
For the next meeting?
Yeah, when we get together to do it?
Yep. So at the, just another timeline on that, with the hope that the CIP committee will endorse the document this Friday, the document will be posted online for review by members of the public and this board as well on Monday of next week. And then the board will have a public hearing on the 17th to collect public comment. So that's an opportunity for members of the public, obviously, to submit their questions, comments, concerns in the document. This board will obviously have the opportunity to discuss the plan at that time as well. And depending on the depth or, the intricacy of the comments, hopefully we can potentially adopt the plan at that meeting and send it to the Board of Selectmen. But And I think that's the plan, but it depends on the comments of the board.
Well, the Board of Selectmen meeting is the next night.
Right. Save any major comment, we would hope to adopt it that evening. I'm just saying if there is something significant that comes up in the interim, we may need to revisit that, but the plan is to get that to the Board of Selectmen for their meeting, and it will be provided as part of the Board of Selectmen's packets for their meeting on the 18th as well.
At what point do we make a presentation to the Budget Committee, the CIP?
There is no presentation of the CIP to the Budget Committee, but it is provided as a resource document to them. I believe that's the way that process has been handled historically.
That may be fine, but your statute says it needs to go to both Board of Selectmen
Oh,
and...
It's provided to both.
It does.
It's provided to both, but a formal presentation is not made to the Budget Committee.
Why is it made only to the Board of Selectmen?
I'm not sure what the answer to that question is.
That, well, it's a public hearing, and I think in the past, other Budget Committee members have come to the Selectmen's meeting.
The CIP has not been presented to the Budget Committee at a Budget Committee meeting,
Right.
no, that's my understanding.
Right.
You know what I think, if I could, oh, go ahead, Mike, finish.
That may be the case, but I don't think that's proper.
Okay.
I think that the way I read the statute, we're supposed to make recommendations to both bodies.
Yeah, yes, we do, and that's usually what I say when at the Selectmen's meeting is that this has been prepared for the Selectmen and the Budget Committee for their use during the budgeting.
Yeah, I mean, the distinction here is that we're talking a presentation or a memo/letter. And in the
Right.
past, a letter has been provided with the CIP, and then it's been distributed to both groups, but a presentation has not been provided to both. Certainly, the planning board could recommend, if they so choose, I think that I present to the Budget Committee, but I don't read it the same way in the statute that a presentation is necessary. Simply provision of the document is what the statute.
No, the statute doesn't call for presentation whatsoever, but I'm a strong believer in precedent. And if we are charged by the statute to make recommendations to both bodies, but we have chosen to make a personal recommendation with a covering letter to only one, we're doing a disservice to the second.
No, the cover letter has been provided to both, but a presentation has not. I'm sorry.
Then perhaps we should either make no presentation to the Budget Committee or make a presentation to both.
Okay, well, we're just telling you the way that we've been doing it in the past.
I understand that that's the way it's been
Okay.
done, and we have always lived in the castle. It was a wonderful book to read, too, but we don't necessarily have to stay there. And
Right.
in my opinion, the statute does state that we are supposed to make recommendations to both bodies, and we're choosing to give precedence to one over the other in the way we make the presentation of the document.
Okay. Go ahead, Paul.
I think we all have strong senses about the projects, the priorities, the alignment with the master plan, cost. I think all those things are you know, kind of, at least in my empty head, they're bouncing around in there. And I think that when we have our public hearing, I think we need to assert that this is a complete process as far as we could have taken it. Because when maybe I'm being a little self-effacing here, but when we endorse something, there are people out there who think that we're putting we're putting a lot behind it. And I think we want to make sure that maybe not to put anybody on the spot, but maybe someone comes forward here at the planning board on whatever the date is and says, these are the goals and objectives we set out to accomplish each year when we do a CIP, and here's how we did against those. Kind of a checklist, so that, you know, the people who are out there who are wondering, you know, as we all know, at least here, what the impact on tax rate can be. When they, you know, they're going to want to know, do we really think that makes a bunch of sense? So maybe, you know, we set up what our goals and objectives were, did we accomplish them, have a short conversation, and then take the vote. I think that would be at least, you don't have to do that, Kathy. You know, you're in charge of this thing, but I think that would make our job a little better. Then, you know, whether we give a presentation to the Budget Committee, which I think we should, or give some document to the Budget Committee, with our perspectives as well as our perspectives on what the selectmen should do. I think that would be more completing this. And then when it's all done, I would like to ask that we put this one on the work plan to figure out whether this CIP process is in sync, because this is one of the things I've had a little challenge with. Are we in sync with the way things should go, or should we get involved at a different point in the overall budgeting process going forward? But that's different.
Well,
That's later on.
and we are going to have those
Yeah, we
conversations.
should.
We had decided, yeah.
I'm more on the, did we complete what we needed to do?
Yeah, Leanne, you're still secretary for the, yeah. When does the budget committee usually get the CIP? Do you?
Usually I mail it to them, so you prepare, typically letters prepared and you sign it, Board of
Right.
Selectmen.
And that's to the budget committee too, I think, that letter. Yeah.
Send it to Board of Selectmen, when they sign off on
Yeah.
it, then you forward another letter with the CIP
Yeah.
package.
Yeah.
Right.
They get all the spreadsheets, and they get the memo,
Okay, so
they see everything.
they get that by the 1st of October,
They
generally.
have it in time for their review of the budget.
Yeah,
They typically don't begin until the second week of November.
yeah.
This year it could be the 7th about,
Mm-hmm.
because of the way it's falling. June 7th and 14th, they have their first budget meeting to review whatever budget's on schedule. They usually get it by the third week in October, depending on when, but it's 17th, so they'll probably get it like whenever. I just need to hear that the Board of Selectmen signed off on it, and then I mail it to them,
Yeah, okay, okay.
and they each receive it.
Board of Selectmen sign off on the CIP, what does that mean?
So you generally, they just accept it.
I think they accept it.
You generally accept it, I think. I don't remember, I'm looking at Brad, but
I think we do just accept it.
I think it's, yeah, they're
The recommendation of the planning board, obviously. I just had a thought, thinking
and
about,
promise to pay attention to it. You
Yeah,
always do
yeah.
that.
I had a thought here is on Mike's comments here about, wanting to present it to the budget committee. I was wondering if, because like as Leanne said, once they get into budget mode there, those guys go nuts for a couple months there. We do it by inviting them, the budget committee, to that selectmen's meeting as a joint, not as a joint, but to be there, so the presentation is done, and have them, the ones that want to attend and listen to it, could have input and, and listen to it, ask questions at that time. That'd be a good idea, or,
That makes sense, that gives
Yeah.
equal precedence and it follows the statute.
Yeah, I think that would be a good way of dealing with it.
EDC coming here and speaking to it as well.
No, they don't have any, they have no jurisdiction, they have no authority, they have only interest. It's like any other citizen.
We should
Public hearing,
invite them.
They can come in and with a public hearing. Again,
My question was, it's asking EDC maybe to come, on whatever night we're going to do this, because they'll have read this document, and I'm sure they'll say this is great for, or not so great, or whatever. They'll have some input on the economic impact of these projects.
I can invite them to that.
Yes, and when you post this on the website, can you put that the public hearing has been continued to the date? Yeah, that would be helpful.
Leanne, you had,
I just,
Yeah.
I just wanted to further state that Bob Tuffer is a member of the CIP. He's the Budget Committee representative that sits on the CIP. And he gives very detailed accounting of what occurs when we have our Budget Committee meetings. We just had a Budget Committee meeting in October. We're updated to that point. I also forward the CIP minutes to the Budget Committee that they can be, as it's ongoing. So, they are filled in. And then I also submit forward the Board of Selectmen Budget Review meeting minutes. So that
Okay.
they can see what's coming and what's been done so they see it at the CIP level, then they see it at the Board of Selectmen level, whether or not it's getting implemented, and then they review the budgets on their own. So it's just a process I don't know if you were aware of, but
No, that's news to me, but it's heartening, and if we did adopt Brad's suggestion to have a joint meeting of BudCom and BOS, when the presentation of the CIP is made, that would then honor statutorily the two bodies to whom this document is supposed to be presented
Right.
in the proper fashion.
Yeah. Have you always been submitting the minutes of CIP to the Budget Committee?
CIP and the budget, and the Board of Selectmen budget review,
Oh.
so that they can track changes.
Oh, okay, so you've done that in the past.
Yeah,
Yeah, oh,
I
okay,
didn't do it the first couple of years because I wasn't aware how they
right,
worked, but I've been doing it for at least 5 or 6 years.
yeah, okay. So there is some
good.
communication
Yeah, this
between
is-
the
this is-
bodies.
this
Yeah,
is good.
go ahead.
Meeting Thursday, not Friday, is that correct? When the CIP?
Sorry, CIP Thursday 9 a.m.
Okay, good. I just-
Thursday at 9 a.m. Yep.
And when the planning board comes to discuss the CIP, what else will be on the agenda besides the CIP committee report?
Well, at our next meeting, well, the architectural,
For agenda items?
Yeah,
We
Yeah,
have a
just-
lot merger.
Yeah, we'll have
We
a lot.
have the O'Brien lot merger, and we will probably have zoning amendments,
Yes,
correct?
we will have zoning amendments.
we'll have that plus
Oh, no,
CIP?
not on the 17th.
No, I think.
No, I'm sorry, sorry. Zoning amendments will be on the 7th of November.
are we doing the architectural
Architectural
standard?
design standards for the 17th, the O'Brien case for lot merger, the CIP public hearing, and there's something else.
My reason I ask is just concerned, as Paul suggested, that if we have a fairly full agenda, which includes the CIP as one of the items, and the CIP does require some discussion, we could be here for a long time.
Okay, well, it's
The
first.
issue is if we defer, then we're going to be here for a longer time. It compounds over time. Compounds over time. I mean, we're going to have a very busy agenda in November as well.
I'm not gonna put the number out there because the number hasn't been finalized yet, but I would tell you the number is a big number. And if we're gonna endorse a big number, I think we need to have some time to soak on the big number. And if we think that and I'm not suggesting we're doing this, if we think that we can just kind of, we got a lot of other things to get done, I'm not gonna be a party to that. So I would ask that we think about carving away some time so that we can have a complete discussion about the entire process. Now, there's no hidden agenda here. I'm not trying to suggest that, we become disruptive, but it seems to me that when you're looking at big numbers, you take the time to look at it.
Yeah, well, it's except for the lot merger, it's the only public hearing. The rest of the things can be dropped off the agenda. Okay, so I think, I think by changing it from tonight to the next meeting, we're going to have a lot more time.
I think so too.
Okay, so,
And we can take as long as we need to.
yeah,
Call that for pizza and coffee.
right. Okay. Matt, anything else?
Not to discuss this here.
Okay, but when we're discussing the CIP public hearing, are you talking about changing the procedures and all that? Because that was going to be sort of a separate item that we just need to do in preparation for next year.
Many of our, at least, and I shouldn't do this, I think several of my colleagues across this board have not participated in CIP. There's a lot of documentation. I mean, this is a pound project. I mean, if you take the amount of documents we create, it's about a pound of paper. It's a pound project. It has a lot of numbers in it. It has a lot of moving parts. And if we're going to ask to use the word endorse, adopt, and those words are important to me, right? I think, and I would ask my colleagues to just consider that we probably would want to give them the benefit of a little soak time, discussion time, question time, and not try to rush this. I'm not suggesting we would. But I think it's also important that the public have an opportunity to come forward as well. And I'm glad that we moved this to the 17th. I was a little concerned that we were going to adopt and then say, and then we'll ask for public input afterwards. I thought that would have been not a good idea. So that's my only point, Kathy. And if
Yeah.
we have to move some things off to the side and maybe have a special extra meeting, let's call it and do it.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Okay. Okay, and I'll have to look back to see what the wording is. I think we,
The motion?
when we give it to the selectmen,
Okay.
I mean, it's, I don't think we approve,
I believe you adopt, yeah, I believe it's an adoption process.
adopt.
Yeah. And
we adopt the CIP and pass it on, yeah.
and
okay.
you don't even really technically need to you don't need to recommend it to the Board of Selectmen or the Budget Committee. It's sort of in the statute already.
Right.
But that process will take place.
Yeah, okay. Okay, folks, anything else? All right, then we can adjourn.
Well, I do.
Oh, yes, you want, yeah, I'm sorry.
I don't want to say that. I don't want to get into the details of this, but this is really a food for thought document that I thought was quite interesting, and I wanted to give you some time, maybe at this meeting, maybe not at this meeting, but with our master plan process, and just as I wanted to note quickly in case we don't get to this next time, we do have consultant interviews scheduled in the next 2 weeks, so we'll actually be bringing people in that did submit proposals as part of our RFP process for an interview. So that's moving forward aggressively. And with that in mind, I do understand that we updated the demographic chapter or the population chapter in 2013, I believe. And I just wanted to provide this because I think it's not only an update or some information on the population component, it's also some interesting socioeconomic stuff that might be good to give you a different perspective, or maybe sort of affirm some of the thoughts you already have about the community. So I don't know if we want to have a discussion about this, about some of the specifics, but I do think it's good to have this background information as we go into the master plan process with a better understanding of what our community actually looks like. Understanding fully, and I just want to point this out, that a lot of this report compares a decennial census, which is a 100% count of the population, to a sample count of the population as part of the American Community Survey. And that's in some ways like comparing to apples to oranges, because you're comparing a full count to a sample. But in a lot of cases, there is some meaning behind very obvious changes that you see here. And I think that's important to consider as we look at the community moving forward.
If I could, Matt, bravo on wherever this came from, and if you did it, hats off to you.
I simply pressed 10 buttons and generated it.
Thank you for the pressing of 10 buttons.
Of course.
I read through this, and I'm not going to get into the sauce on it. I'll let everybody else do it. But as I read through this, it brings, at least to me, it brings obvious questions about where we set priorities, economic development priorities, planning board priorities, housing priorities. It really has where we set job priorities. It has a lot of implications for us, and we could spend a bunch of time debating the data, which I don't want to do. I think it's a good time to debate the direction of the data, and it's very informative. So I appreciate this. Thank you very much for doing it.
One other sort of disclaimer on this I just want to mention is that obviously a full analysis of a lot of these things would involve comparing this to other more comparable geographies, like other towns in the state of New Hampshire, rather than just the United States as a whole or other counties. But this is just one comparison for your perspective.
You also notice that the color coding is important. The coefficient of variation suggests that numbers in black you can have some confidence in. Numbers in other colors you really shouldn't have much confidence in.
Yeah, they're directional.
Yeah, they're sort of directional.
Yeah.
But the numbers in black are really indicative of a town which is quite significantly split down the middle between those who are fairly well off and comfortable, those who are on retirement incomes subject to vagaries of the economic conditions in the outer world outside, and those who are just about making it. And my first thought was we have to be very careful when we do our zoning ordinances when CIP makes recommendations for projects, remember that we on this board are not in the group that is just about barely making it as a general number. We are perhaps in the more comfortable section of
Speak for
the
yourself.
town demographic, and that when we propose a tax bill, we need to be aware that while it may be a burden for us, it may be really an insurmountable one for those who are on SSI.
I had, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, Linda Murray did a much better job than me providing feedback on the initial CIPC document. I mean, she was outstanding, and she's been outstanding through the whole process. I was kind of on an airplane and gave you some suggested charts. I think it's important that you maybe consider, over the past 5 years, trends. What's been the trend of revenues for the town, trend of property valuations. You now have trends of population. And to the extent that we start to display that in simple, easy to understand charts, without, spreadsheets that people's eyeballs glaze over, if you could explain that in a chart or two, it begins to tell it's a narrative. It doesn't tell a story, but it's a narrative, which I think is important for all of us to kind of look at, debate, have a conversation about, and then to Mike's point, it'll help us figure out what we might want to do around this board on a go-forward basis.
I think we have to be very careful when we make proposals for changes in the town, and not just weigh their economic impact, but to consider their fairness too. Consider the authors of the proposed changes as well. There are folks you see down in the plaza you never see on a town board. There are folks that you see down in the plaza you never see coming to a public hearing. But they're the folks, according to this demographic, who maybe account for 50% or more of the people who are going to vote for these warrant articles. And if we're going to propose a warrant article which has a significant financial impact on the town, we have to be aware that they're going to be the guys who are going to be carrying the cost. They're not here because for whatever reason, voicing their approval or disapproval of whatever it is that we may be proposing. We have to be conscious of a responsibility to a section of the town which generally either doesn't feel enfranchised or doesn't care to be, but is nonetheless part of the town.
Right, and they do come out in March, and this last town meeting, remember the weather?
Yeah.
Still a good turnout, right, Brett? Yeah. And those are, yes, yeah.
I think I'll add to that too is that the board, the selectmen, we've always been very cognizant of the fact that we want to have every warrant article and anything that we put out to the public there to also have the tax rate impact listed with it, so that each person can determine as they read it, well, geez, this is going to cost me, $1 per thousand, or this will only be a nickel per thousand. It gives them a sense of what the impact would be on their overall tax bill and stuff. So that's for those same reasons we think it's very important for the people to get all the information they can to make their decisions and stuff. So.
Okay, all right, great. Okay, someone want to make a motion to adjourn? Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye, opposed? Okay.